A verdict is expected as soon as tonight in the Chinese espionage case against Canadian Michael Spavor. Canada says the charges are arbitrary and demands his immediate release, along with that of fellow Canadian Michael Kovrig. A source with direct knowledge of the situation tells CBC News the Canadian government expects both the verdict and the sentencing to happen at the same time. Spavor has been detained in China now for more than 2.5 years. A Chinese court also upheld the death sentence of Canadian prisoner Robert Schellenberg last night. He was convicted in 2018 of drug smuggling.
Canada condemns this verdict on all possible terms. And again, we call on China to grant Robert Schellenberg clemency.
For more on this, we've reached Guy Saint-Jacques. He served as Canada's ambassador to China from 2012 to 2016. Mr. Saint-Jacques is in Montreal. Thank you very much for speaking with us today. What I'm being told by a source with direct knowledge of the situation is that we are anticipating a verdict as well as possible sentencing in the case of Michael Spavor. It could happen as early as tonight. What are you hearing? I know you're incredibly well connected. What should Canadians expect to happen in the hours ahead?
Well, it's the normal process where the verdict is announced. And in this case, it's all preordained because, as you know, when you are formally charged in the Chinese system, you are found guilty 99.9% of the time. And also, we saw how expeditive the trial of Mr. Spavor was. It lasted only a few hours, so it was all preordained. The defense had no access to the evidence. So I expect a very harsh sentence. I think at the minimum, he will get 10 years. And it's part of that strategy by the Chinese government to build up the pressure on the Canadian government so that the government will finally agree to return Mrs. Meng to China.
You said 10 years is at least the minimum you're expecting. What kind of sentence options are on the table here?
Well, hopefully the death sentence won't be on the table, but it could be a life sentence. And it will be interesting to see what will be the sentence in both cases. I expect that, in fact, Mr. Kovrig could be subject to a harsher sentence than Mr. Spavor because he is a former diplomat, and the Chinese want to put pressure on him and on the Canadian government. So, and the timing of all of this is not accidental. The Chinese know that we are in the final phase of the hearings of the case of Mrs. Meng, and they want to send again the message to the Canadian government that it's time to return Mrs. Meng.
I was going to say, I want to ask you about the case against Michael Kovrig as well, but the timing of all this. Meng Wanzhou is the final arguments by the Huawei CFO's lawyers are happening to get this situation dismissed, and they're trying to fight that extradition, get everything dismissed. The timing of all of this, it can't be a coincidence, can it be?
No, with the Chinese, there's no coincidence. Of course, we know that the process, the extradition process, could drag on in as much as once Justice Holmes render her decision, and this could take a few months. I would expect that maybe by October we will have more clarity. But then Mrs. Meng can appeal, and this can drag on for years. So we have to brace ourselves that our two Canadians will receive harsh sentences, while Mrs. Meng continues to live in her mansion in Vancouver, and she stays there for a number of years.
So we're seeing this development in the case against Michael Spavor. There, of course, is a separate case against Michael Kovrig. Why are, is there any reason why both of these cases are not moving forward at the same time? Or why are they waiting on the Kovrig case?
Well, they want to pretend that they have an independent judiciary system, and you will recall that there were 3 days between the two trials when they took place in March. So I would expect that maybe in 3 days from now we will hear about Mr. Kovrig. But last fall, President Xi told the member of the party that the Chinese Communist Party is above the law, and that judiciary officials have to take their marching orders from the party. So in this case, it's all a sham, as we know that it's all preordained, and that because of the political angle we know that both Canadians will receive very harsh sentences.
A Chinese court upheld Robert Schellenberg's death sentence yesterday, and of course, this is happening as all of these developments are happening all at the same time. Meng Wanzhou's hearing heads into its final stages before the extradition process, forms up. What we are being told, or at least what I'm being told, is that there are still a number of steps here for Mr. Schellenberg, and this case has to be reviewed by China's Supreme Court. What happens next for Mr. Schellenberg, and are you deeply concerned that China is going to follow through with this sentence?
Well, I am. In fact, the last and only step is for the Chinese Supreme Court to render a decision. As I just said, we know that it's a political case, that the sentence will be confirmed, and then it will be the Damocles sword over the head of Mr. Schellenberg. When will he be executed? When I was ambassador, we had 2 Canadians that were executed, I think one in 2014, one in 2015, despite all the pleas for clemency that we made. Apart from Mr. Schellenberg, we have 3 other Canadians sitting on death row in China. So, and the Chinese can be very brutal too. And so to add to the pressure, they could proceed with some of these execution. That's why I think the Canadian government should try to rally as much support as possible from allies and continue to put pressure on Washington to try to come up with a solution that could take the form of a plea bargain with Mrs. Meng, or whether they would agree to go only after Huawei itself and drop the charges against her.
Mr. Saint-Jacques, we've got 1 minute left here. I'm being told that Canadian like-minded allies will be gathering at the embassy in Beijing to show support and send a message to China that what's going on here, not just in the case of Mr. Spavor, but to help show support for calls for clemency for Mr. Schellenberg. What else can Canada do at this point to try and prevent China from carrying out the death penalty against Mr. Schellenberg?
Well, I think we have to work also in the various capitals and try to go broader than that, to try to agree on common strategies, including sanctions. If China dares taking people as hostages in the future. And so on that, there's a lot that could be done, and including working together to make a decision on whether we should boycott the Winter Olympics, or whether Canada and the U.S. Could offer to jointly host the Olympics, provided that if it were to be delayed by a year, knowing that, in fact, the Delta variant is starting to make inroads in China.
Really quickly, we have to wrap up here, but, from your perspective, would it be safe for Canadian athletes to go to Beijing next year, knowing that these Canadians are either faced with a death penalty and then being arbitrarily held by the Chinese government?
I think it would be safe, but the basic question is, should we allow a country like China, where it has been found that there is a genocide going on in Saint-Jacques, they are stopping any kind of autonomy in Hong Kong and freedom of speech? Is this the right place to host the games? And in my view, the answer is no.
Mr. Saint-Jacques, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.